of emphasis and then say you're going to face all of these things?
Because it's reality.
It's reality. So why would you want to tell somebody about reality?
So they're prepared.
So they're prepared. So it's actually a form of ease, which is so interesting about this ayah, because it talks about hardship upon hardship upon hardship, but the whole thing is actually talking about ease. Allah saying, I love you so much, I'm going to warn you about all the things that are going to happen. I'm going to tell you exactly what you're going to face, right? It's like a teacher who gives you an exam without giving you a study guide, and then there's another teacher who gives you a study guide, right? So she wants you to be prepared. Like, here, these are all the things that are going to be on the test. Now if you fail the test, it's entirely your fault, right? But Allah is like that. Allah is like the teacher, and to him belongs the highest example. He never gives us anything without first warning us about it. And then he also gives us the steps that we can take to earn his mercy, even as we're going through that test. Because I had the translation, but I wanted to actually go through it. Okay. So Allah basically warned us that there would be some pain in this dunya. He listed out all the pain. But it always, why does it feel like we're suffering, right? A lot of people say, why is dunya so hard? Why is it that we have test after test after test and the tests never stop, right? And the answer to that is because pain and suffering are not the same thing, okay? Pain is actually a one-time event. It's something that happens to you once, but suffering depends on your interpretation. It's on all the extra stories that you create about the event. And that's how people keep reliving their suffering, what we also call trauma sometimes. It doesn't always have to be trauma. So again, pain is the original, the raw direct experience. For example, someone losing somebody they love, right? That is an experience that happened in that moment. It's extremely painful. Sometimes people even, their heart literally, like, it becomes weak because of the heartbreak, right? Emotional heartbreak can actually affect your physical health as well. So they're experiencing this pain, but then they start to suffer for the rest of their life. They never really come to terms with their loss, right? But Allah didn't intend that for us. Allah did intend pain for a purpose, with a purpose, but He did not intend for us to suffer. So there's three things, general, like very broad categories of why we continue to suffer. The first one is we get attached to our pain. The second one is we resist our pain. And the third one is that we inflate it with interpretations and stories. And we'll go through each of these in detail, inshallah. Okay, so the first one is you get attached to your pain and you keep telling the same story over and over again. Your pain is all you've known, so now you become very comfortable in it. And so you keep telling the story to other people. Anytime someone asks you to tell them about something about yourself, instead of talking about like maybe your accomplishments or Allah's blessings on you, it always goes back to that one story. And sometimes you'll see this. You'll meet people who are like in their 40s and 50s even, and they'll talk about something that happened in their 20s or in their childhood because they're just so consumed, they've never healed from that. So even though the incident happened once, they were supposed to learn and move on, they caused suffering for themselves because they kept repeating it. So for your example, it's just kind of there because these concepts are supposed to be reflective. So if somebody finds anything that is personally relevant, then it's good to reflect on those things, because when we just sit there and we passively take in knowledge, it doesn't help us actually transform ourselves. But when we are able to take a concept and then apply it to our own selves, that's how change occurs. So for each of these, I just put like a your example box, and that's just for you to personally be like, oh, does this relate to me? How does it relate to me? That's all. If it doesn't apply, that's fine. Okay, the second one is basically resisting pain. Okay, so you're numbing yourself so you don't have to feel the pain, and you're denying its existence. For example, like let's say there's a couple and they're having problems, and the wife is like, oh, let's go to marriage counseling, and the guy's like, no, we're fine. We don't need marriage counseling. It's very common, right? Very, very common. Women are always trying to drag their husbands to marriage counseling, and they don't want to go. It's because they're denying that it's even there. They don't have the courage to actually feel the pain. They're pretending that everything is okay, and they're like, okay, maybe if I just brush it under the rug, it's just going to disappear, but it doesn't actually disappear. Because if you resist your pain, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Eventually, it just explodes. And then again, we have your example. All right, the third one is interpretation of events. So like, if something happens, that one event happens, and we're like, oh, this means that. We create a story about it. And the story doesn't necessarily have to be true, but if we believe it, that's enough to cause suffering, which is actually huge because we create our own reality in that way. So we have like 3 different examples here, and they're all basically very common examples. So like, let's say there's a kid, like a 7-year-old kid, right? Very limited life experience, doesn't really understand much in life, and he's thinking, oh, my dad hits me. Well, there's so many different reasons why the dad might do that, right? Maybe he grew up in a culture where it's okay to hit your kids, spank your kids, right? Maybe he has anger issues. Maybe it just happened as a one-time incident, right? But it just happened so badly. Maybe the dad didn't regularly hit the child, but one day it just got so bad that the child remembered that incident for the rest of his life. Now he took that one incident, made a story about it. The child is telling himself, my dad doesn't love me. I'm unlovable. The problem is with myself. I'm a bad kid. I deserve to be punished. Again, this is very, very, very common. Like, the child doesn't have the mental capacity to understand that someone else's actions are not about me. And the funny thing is, we even do that as adults. We forget sometimes that other people's actions are not about us, and we take it personally. So when people take these things personally repeatedly, they're torturing themselves internally repeatedly. Another example, a child is growing up, they're saying, my parents always praised and favored my older brother. That might be a fact, right? These are all facts on the other side. So that child might actually see that the parent is actively favoring the older brother, right? They're actively talking about, oh, you know, your brother got like all A's, why can't you get them? Or when guests come over, they always talk about the older brother, never talk about the little one. And this child is internalizing all of this. So again, he says, my parents don't love me. No matter how hard I try, I'll never be good enough. I'm not smart enough. So that child is going to carry that wound with them for the rest of their life unless they heal it. And this is how they're causing suffering for themselves. Last one is, applies to us as Muslims. Sometimes if Allah is giving us test after test, that might be true. Allah might actually be giving us test after test. But what does that mean? And the meaning of it, the way we interpret it is very important because it determines our relationship with Allah. If we interpret it like that, Allah doesn't love me, right, then we are actually distancing ourselves from Allah ourselves, right? Allah never actually intended that for us. He only intended that I'm going to elevate this person. I'm going to forgive their sins. I'm going to bring them closer. Like, maybe this person's going to make dua to me. They're going to come closer. But instead, we're just like, we have this negative narrative in our head, and the story's playing, and we're telling ourselves, oh, everybody else has it good. Allah doesn't love me. And then that last one, everyone else has it good. What does that lead to? What negative feelings can that lead to further on? Jealousy, yes, that's a big one. What's his name? Yeah. Not feeling confident? Yeah, yeah. I feel like the second one is more related to confidence. The third one is specifically about Allah, and I feel like that's important because I feel like all of us can somehow relate to it because all of us go through tests, right? So it's basically, it's going to lead to jealousy, like the sister said, and then it's also going to lead to ungratefulness, which is Shaitan's ultimate goal, is to make you ungrateful, right? Even when he was talking to Allah about Adam alayhi salam, he said, I'm going to lead them all astray, and his goal was to basically make us ungrateful. A lot of the hardships that we face, they are related to Allah wanting to bring us back to gratitude, right? And a lot of the diseases of the heart, they lead to ingratitude. So gratitude is one of the biggest positive forces that we have in bringing us back to Allah. So the stories that we tell ourselves make us ungrateful, or they can make us grateful, even with the same hardship. That's why sometimes you'll have people who are going through something very small, and again, it's just not to minimize somebody's hardship, but let's say something small like their car broke down, right, compared to someone who is going through a divorce, right? So sometimes we'll see that the one whose car broke down, they absolutely lose it, right? They don't even have an ounce of sabr, and they're just completely like in shambles, like, how could this happen to me? And it's, why is it always me? And why is Allah doing this to me? Whereas the person who's going through a divorce, which is much, much bigger, they're like, oh, like, I'm gonna have my composure, inshallah it's for the best, I know this hurts. They acknowledge their pain, but they're like, you know what? Allah wants something better for me. Why do those two people have such different responses, even though the second one's, their hardship was so much bigger? That response, where did it come from? Any guesses? So the one whose car broke down, such a small problem, right? The one who's going through a divorce, it's a big problem, but how did they take it so gracefully? How were they able to? Yeah, it's what you tell yourself. So the first one, he was like, oh, well, woe is me. Allah hates me. It's all about, and it's really easy to do this, right? I'm sure all of us have done this at least once in our life where we didn't know enough and we're like, oh, we think that the problem is all on our plate, our life. We have all the problems. Everybody else has it good, right? This is actually called a cognitive distortion in psychology, where you see everybody else as having a better life than you. And Shaitan's role, he plays a big role in these stories, by the way. Shaitan's role is that, how do I make this person's story bigger and bigger and bigger and make it explode in their head, right? And so we do ask for Allah for the protection from the waswasa, right? Because any thoughts that we have already, Shaitan can just blow them up out of proportion. The other person, however, their response came from a place of the story they told themselves. But it's a true story, right? Which is what Allah tells us about himself. Allah does not wish for you hardship. Allah wishes for you ease. Allah tells us in Surah Baqarah, in the ayah of fasting. So now you take Allah's words, you adopt them as your own personal story. And you keep telling yourself that story, which is not really a story, it's the truth. And so your thoughts are going to determine your behavior, right? And that's why when Sister Naima mentioned earlier, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, I wasn't going to talk about that, but I just remembered that it is the perfect follow-up to the ayah, right? And that's that response. It doesn't come sincerely unless you're thinking it, right? A lot of people will say Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, but they're not actually feeling it, they're not actually thinking it, they're just kind of like doing lip service, right? But unless you believe the words, unless you believe that Allah actually wants good for you, those words are not going to mean anything. And they're not going to bring you that comfort. They're supposed to bring you comfort, but they won't unless you mean them. So that's why it's important. Okay, so again, your example, if this applies to you, you would put your example and kind of reflect on it. Like, if something happened in my life in the last 6 months, in the last year, in the past 5 years, how have I processed that pain? Did my pain turn into suffering? Did I repeat the story to myself 1,000,000 times over until it became worse than it actually was? Right? Sometimes we even distort our memories, which, in psychology, it's a concept where if you keep, sometimes our bad memories, they become worse over time because we keep playing them in our heads. And so the incident might not have been like that big, but it becomes that big 5 years later because you keep repeating it and feeling the emotions over and over and over again. So you're growing your emotional distress, and now your response level, like your ability to respond properly, goes down. So that's how it's related to that. Okay, so I want you to imagine like these darts, right? That's the visual. When pain comes your way, it's like you got hit with a dart once, or like an arrow. Arrow is more dramatic. So like an arrow hits your heart. That's the way like heartbreak feels, right? When you're going through something really, really hard. Like even if somebody says some words to you that are like super mean, doesn't it feel like something just pierced you? But with the suffering, what you're doing now, it's like you're repeatedly throwing more arrows into your own heart. So you're feeling that experience over and over and over again. So pain, the ayah that we talked about, Allah said, I will test you. He was talking about this. He said the pain will come. For sure, the pain will come. Expect it, right? Be ready for it. Wear your armor, protect yourself. The pain is gonna come. The suffering though, that's optional. That's not what Allah was telling us. That's not what Allah was saying, like, you have to suffer in dunya, right? Like dunya is a place of, a lot of Muslims have this misconception, like we're here only to be tested, and we're here only to have problems. It's just one test after another, just problem after problem. But the thing is, Allah said with hardship comes ease, right? But if your mindset is that I'm only in dunya to be tested, what you're actually thinking is, I'm in dunya to suffer. Like I have to actually go through the pain over and over, and that's a sign of righteousness. But it's not, right? A sign of righteousness is that when Allah sends you the pain, you have composure. To recognize the pain, okay, like Allah gave me this test, but I'm gonna make use of it. I'm gonna do something good with it. I'm gonna come closer to Allah through it. I'm gonna turn this calamity into something opposite. That's your response. But if you continually just play the story, that's turning you into a bitter person, right? And Allah doesn't want that, because that's actually creating hardship for yourself. So if Allah doesn't want hardship for you, why are you creating hardship for yourself, right? Something to think about. Are there people like that? Are there? You tell me. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
make it easier for this,
That's a very interesting point. I think maybe what you mean to say is that there are people who have not been tested the way we see tests, but they have the test of ease. Because ease is also a test. There are some people who, yeah, maybe they're financially well off, and they have a good family, and they have a good job, they have all the dunya blessings, right? But they're being tested. They don't know it though, which is scarier. It's scarier because a lot of times when we don't know we're being tested, we're more likely to fail the test.
And we're going to be asked for every blessing. So the people with more money, they have responsibilities.
Yeah.
Where did you spend your money and how?
Exactly. Exactly. And like the point of both ease and hardship is to remember Allah, right? In the hadith that the Prophet said to, I think one of the Sahaba, the younger Sahaba, he said, remember Allah in times of ease, and Allah will remember you in times of difficulty. So even if you're in a time of ease, you have to recognize it. Allah put me in a time of ease right now. What am I doing? Am I actually grateful? Am I turning back to Allah just as much as I would in hardship? So the people who look like they're not going through anything, if they're not remembering Allah, it's actually worse for them, right? If you're going through something and that's bringing you closer to Allah, that's Allah's blessing on you. So again, the perspective is everything. No matter what you're going through, perspective is the biggest thing. That's why it's really important to remember that, okay, whatever situation I'm in, Allah put me in it, and I'm going to make the most out of this situation. So if you have ease, create ease for others, right? And again, Sister Naima, what you said, when they have one hardship, they lose it, right? Because they're not used to it. Again, it's about building that capacity. Sometimes when Allah gives you hardship and hardship and hardship, He's actually building your capacity to endure patiently. And then also to get out of it eventually, because we're not just supposed to endure patiently alone. Okay, everything's temporary. So this is like the whole pain and suffering. Again, pain is, it's temporary, right? Because in dunya, everything is temporary. It's never 100% day. It's never 100% night. Allah keeps rotating the two to show us that He can bring about change in just one night, overnight. Sometimes it happens. Sometimes you wait years for ease to come, and sometimes Allah creates ease in a second. Sometimes Allah changes your heart in a second. Sometimes you make dua for years to forgive somebody, and it doesn't happen. And then you go to Umrah or you go to Hajj and you make dua at the Kaaba, and it's vanished, right? Those are miracles Allah shows us in our own heart. Like when we hear stories of miracles of the prophets, we look for miracles outside of us. But really the biggest miracles happen inside of us, right? Have you ever wanted to like change your heart so badly about something because maybe you found a disease in your heart, right? We all have disease in our heart. Like some have vanity, some have jealousy, some have, stinginess, right? And we wish we could be more generous. We wish we could be more loving. And we make sincere dua to Allah, and we're struggling, we're trying, and it doesn't happen. And then one day, all of a sudden, we hear this really sad story about, an orphan who needs money. Boom, we just open our wallets and give. And before we were never able to give. And Allah opens the heart, right? So this shows us that even though the hardship is there, Allah can change it just like that. So when we choose to suffer, we're taking a temporary state and we're turning it permanent. And we're not actually supposed to do that, right? We're supposed to let the temporariness remain because it's a part of nature. Nature keeps changing. The seasons keep changing. And so our hearts also should be changing, right? We shouldn't be holding on to a negative experience and now it just becomes all of who we are. So there's so many lessons we can learn from nature, by the way. It's an amazing healer. Okay, so we're circling back to the ayah, and this time I want to talk about the idea of sabr again, but this time in resilience. So resilience basically is described as, imagine a rubber band. If you pull a rubber band, it comes back, right? You pull it again, it comes back. You pull it again. That's resilience. So Allah is saying the tests will come. The test is coming one after another. I'll just put the English translation. The tests are coming one after another, but you keep getting back up. You don't stay down there. You keep getting back up because you have hope, because you have Allah, because you know that Allah wants me to get back up and continue living my life. That's resilience. So one really famous example of resilience we have in our history is the story of Hajar alayhi salam. So Hajar, when she was taken to the desert, right, by Ibrahim alayhi salam, as we all know, she asked him, why are you leaving us here, right? And he didn't say anything because he was just so overcome by sadness and emotion, like, what, And she asked him again, like, why are you leaving us here? And he didn't say anything. And the third time, he just stopped in his tracks. And she asked him, did Allah ask you to leave us here, right, in the desert? And then he said yes. And that's it. He didn't have even the strength to say anything more, and he left. And she said, Allah will take care of us. If Allah commanded you to do this, Allah will take care of us. Because if Allah sends the hardship, there is no way that He's not sending the ease as well. There's no way, right? فَإِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا إِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا. Allah says it twice. So she's like, okay, what do I do? My baby's hungry. I'm, hot sun. It's in the desert. Nobody's there. Not a single soul. Not a single bird. No animal. Nothing. And she starts running. She starts running from Safa to Marwa. And she doesn't just run once or twice, right? And when we go to Umrah and Hajj, like it's so hard. It's so difficult for us to even walk on the marble floor with the AC and everything. Imagine her in like the hot sun, and she's running and running and running. What made her run 7 times? Why? Why didn't she just stop? What made her run 7 times? Well, did we have wahy? I mean, did she? Something in her. What was that? We can get more specific, actually. I like that, but we can get more specific. What was it that made her do that over and over and over again? The stress?
One of the scholars says she was trying to see if she find anything, to see back and forth if she see anybody.
Yeah.
I think I heard that one.
That's true. So she's doing her part, right? She's tying the camel, as we say from the hadith. She's doing that, but what is that thing in her that made her do that? Like what quality that something as believers we're supposed to have? Yaqeen in Allah. Yes, tawakkul, basically. Yeah, yaqeen in Allah. Because when she is in that desert, she's not focused on her hardship. She's not focused on, oh my God, now I'm doomed. Now what am I going to do? Like, woe is me. I don't have anything to do. Like, she's actually focused on Allah. With her vision, her spiritual vision, she's seeing Allah. Allah's going to help me. Not like directly seeing Allah. She's seeing Allah's hand in everything. She said, if Allah commanded Ibrahim alayhi salam to bring me to this point, Allah is the one who's going to take me through it, but I'm going to do something about it. That's resilience. That's the definition of resilience. But that is sabr, actually, right? A lot of times, sabr is very misunderstood, by the way, in our community and in the Muslim discourse. Like, when somebody dies, they say, oh, have sabr. And they tell the person not to cry. They think not crying is sabr. That's not it. They say basically show no emotion, just become a statue, and don't even like show like that you're feeling anything. And that's completely contrary to sabr. Like it doesn't make any sense at all. And we get that directly from the Quran because Yaqub alayhi salam, right, when Yusuf alayhi salam was taken from him, he cried as a prophet, right? So we don't take culture as our standard. We take the prophets as our standard, right? The stories of the prophets are there for us to learn from. And of course, Prophet ﷺ is the biggest example, but even all the prophets in the Quran, like the only thing we don't follow is their sharia, right? Their law, their rulings we don't follow because they're from a different time. Legally, we follow the Quran and Sunnah. But when it comes to their akhlaq, when it comes to their manners with Allah, when it comes to their du'as, when it comes to the qualities that they had, how they lived with their families, the adab they had with Allah when conversing with Him, we learn from all of those things. And so even from their human examples, there's so much to learn about vulnerability from the prophets. They didn't pretend to be robots. They didn't pretend to be like emotionless. They cried and they felt and they had all these emotions and they weren't afraid to express it to Allah. They weren't afraid to be vulnerable, right? And so Yaqub alayhi salam, he cried until he went blind. Did he not have sabr? He did. Allah said he had sabr. Sabrun jameel. It occurs twice in the Surah Yusuf, right? 2 different occasions, Allah has said he had the most beautiful patience. Not just he was patient. Allah could have said he was patient, right? But why did Allah describe to us his crying? Why did Allah describe to us that he went blind? It's to show the extent of his sorrow, right? You feeling your human emotions does not mean that you're not close to Allah. Right? Because why would Allah give you emotions if you weren't supposed to feel them? Right? Does Allah do anything without reason? He doesn't, right?
So isn't the story where Allah says he appreciates his patience so much that even if his kids were dead, he would revive them?
Does he say that? I don't remember. I don't remember. Okay. So yeah, what was I saying? So I lose my train of thought very easily. No, you're good. I like interaction, but I also lose my train of thought. Yes. So like, okay, so that ayah, right, in the Quran where Allah says that when we look at the nature and like the mountains and the sun and the moon, we're supposed to say, رَبَّنَا مَا خَلَقْتَ هَذَا بَاطِلًا. Like, oh Lord, like, oh Allah, you have not created this for no reason, right? For no purpose. So everything in creation, including us, including our emotions, have a reason, right? What is the purpose of our emotions? Is to show us, like, it's a deeper level of self-awareness. Why are we feeling what we're feeling? How can we deal with what we're feeling, right? And one of the greatest things that emotions can teach us is empathy, right? When we feel sadness, when somebody else is feeling sad, we can relate to it, right? If we have lost something, when somebody else has lost someone or something, we can relate to that. It teaches us empathy, teaches us how to relate to them, to other people, and treat them well. Because imagine if we were all emotionless and then something happened, we could never comfort each other, right? Another thing, our emotions they're a strength and they're a weakness, right? They're a strength because there are certain emotions that bring us closer to Allah, like gratitude, like patience, for example, right? Sabr. But there's certain emotions that they have the potential to take us away from Allah, like anger, if it's misplaced anger. So then what happens when we realize the weakness in our emotions? It takes us again back to Allah. The goal of everything is go back to Allah. So if I have an emotion that I don't know how to deal with, if I'm drowning in grief, if I'm exploding with anger, what am I supposed to do with it? Deal with it on my own, pretend it doesn't exist, right? Just pretend like, if you have an emotion, you're not dealing with it, it's gonna come out on everybody around you, right? That's why people have temper tantrums and they go into depression because they're not dealing with their sadness properly the way they're supposed to be dealt with. They're not talking about it. They're numbing themselves. But everything is actually supposed to push you back to Allah. Ya Allah, I'm weak, right? That's the point. Ya Allah, I'm weak. I need your help. I need your help to transform what is inside of me. That's the point of all of these hardships, right? Whether it's the fear. If you have fear, where do you go? Ya Allah, please cover me. Yeah, please protect me. Please don't let me lose my job, or please don't let me, fail this class. Whatever it is, whatever you're fearful about, turn it into dua. That's what Prophet ﷺ would do, right? If you're going through hunger, Allah says, there's a really long hadith Qudsi where Allah says, "Oh my servants, all of you are hungry except the ones I have fed. All of you are misguided except the ones I have guided. All of you are unclothed except the ones that I have clothed. So ask me for food and I'll give you food. Ask me for guidance and I'll give you guidance. Ask me for clothing and I will cover you." And we're thinking like, so basic, right? Food, clothing, like guidance. We all take it for granted. But Allah's saying, no, ask me. Because if I didn't give it to you, you wouldn't have it. Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Exactly. The best du'as in the Quran are the most emotional ones, aren't they? Like when Musa alayhi salam's mother, when she cried out to Allah, Allah described her heart as the fu'ad. Fu'ad is like a heart that is inflamed with emotion, right? And people like to say, oh, women are too emotional, and they say it like it's a bad thing, right? They mean it as a bad thing, right? When people say women are too emotional, but it's not always a bad thing. It was her strength. Allah cared about her heart. He said her heart was literally on fire. That's what fu'ad means in Arabic. Her heart was like, oh my God, what's going to happen to my son? Is he going to get killed? But Allah, later in the story, He says that when she sent him in the Nile and he returned him back to her, He said, we returned him back to you so that you wouldn't grieve. Allah cared about her heart. Allah cared about her emotions that much that He returned Musa to her the same day. That same day, Musa was returned to her under the guise of her feeding him, right, from the palace. Why? Because her heart mattered to Allah. It's really important that we use our emotions to connect with Allah, right? Iman itself, it's belief and action, right? The Prophet said Iman goes up and down. So it's basically like, it's the feeling of Iman that is going up and down, right? And sometimes our feelings dictate our actions, but again, it shouldn't always be that way. Like you still gotta pray if you don't feel like praying, that's a thing. But the more emotions you have, the more enjoyable your worship is, right? The sweetness of Iman, we call it. So your sweetness of Iman will go up and down as your emotions go up and down, but the point is to regulate it, and the point is to take whatever is thrown your way and turn it back to closer to Allah. Again, loss of property, life and crops. If we lose things, that does something. It detaches us from dunya, right? Because all of us can get attached to dunya. Some of us are attached to people, clothes, fashion, money, whatever it is. We all have our attachments, right? So when we lose things and hardships come our way, Allah is breaking that detachment, that illusion of perfection that we have. Like, I shouldn't have any problems, or I shouldn't go through anything. Allah's like, no, you are going to go through it, right? This is a general ayah, by the way, that applies to everybody. So whether you have the test of ease or you have the test of hardship, you are going to have a test. But it's about what are you doing with it, right? And this is a quote by Ibn al-Jawzi, rahimahullah. He said, this world is a bridge, and a bridge should not be taken as a home. This goes back to that concept of temporariness versus permanence. So if something is temporary, like if you're traveling, most of the road is just a road, right? And the bridge comes for like 2 seconds, and you cross the bridge, that's it, it's over. At the most, a couple minutes. So it's just like that. Like, we're here in this dunya, and we're just like traveling through, and you know, the world is a bridge, dunya is a bridge. We're just passing through. But then we start building our homes here. We think we're going to be here forever. So we have this illusion, right? We start to think life is so long. I have so many things I need to accomplish, you know, but if life keeps throwing me problems, how am I going to keep doing it? But Allah's like reminding you with the problems that, hey, I'm giving you problems here because this is not the place you're going to be forever. So it's a constant reminder that we have to go to the akhirah, that our home is in the akhirah. So Allah's like, actually, again, it's a mercy because He's constantly reminding you through those hardships that you have a final permanent place to be. And it increases our yearning for Jannah. It increases our yearning to meet Allah, because you know when you're like really, really in deep pain, like you're just like, Ya Allah, I don't want to be here anymore. Not in a morbid, like, you know, suicidal kind of way, but in a way like, this place hurts me so much, I just want to be close to you, right? You want that connection. And look, even if we haven't said it, we felt that way sometimes. Like, this place is so imperfect. This place is so full of pain. I don't want to be here. Like, it makes you yearn for the akhirah in a healthy way, right? So it breeds like this healthy detachment from dunya and healthy attachment to akhirah. But again, it should be balanced, not taken to extremes, right? Because there are some people who, again, we talked about how they take on suffering over and over and over, because like this pain, this dunya is all suffering. It's not. This dunya has good in it too, right? Okay, so the key takeaway is, one, for whoever it applies, what are the few incidents in life that caused you pain, right? As in bad things that actually happened that caused you pain. But two, what stories have you told yourself as a result, right? This is all about your perception again. So if something bad happened to you, were you able to interpret it in a way that brought you closer to Allah? This could be past, present, whatever, or you can take it as a future reference. Or was there anything that happened in your life that actually took you away from Allah, right? And sometimes people ask, and this is my final point, and then we'll just do Q&A. Sometimes people ask, how do I know if my test is a test or a punishment, right? It's a very common question people ask. And the answer to that is, it's in your response. That's it. If Allah tests you with something and you become ungrateful and you become, very angry at Allah, right? Not just the situation, but you become angry at Allah. You stop making dua. You stop praying. You go away from Him. You go away from religion, away from religious people, and you just become bitter, right? If you become bitter, your heart becomes closed, and that was a punishment. That was a punishment for you. But if Allah gives you a test, and you become closer to Him, and your heart starts becoming more humble, and you're crying to Him, and you're making dua, and you're increasing in your ibadah, and you're becoming kinder to other people, right? Your pain has softened you, and you become more compassionate towards other people, more understanding. That is actually, now you're passing the test. That's a sign that you're passing the test, right? Because Allah's not going to come down and tell you, but if you have a test and you're behaving in a humble way, then that means, inshallah, that it's good for you. And that's all. Do we have any questions? Yes. This is Naima. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And one is the subject, to take you higher level or to close to Him.
Yeah.
And the other one, one is the reminder that you are doing ma'asi, like you go away from Allah,
Yeah.
and Allah, remind you to go back. And one is that to test you, see how you test you, how you're gonna pass the test.
Yes.
The test
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, the effects of sins, right? You were talking about the punishment of sins in the last point that you made? Okay, I didn't understand the last point. You were saying that were you talking about the effects of sins, like when you is that what you're talking about? Okay. Sorry, I didn't understand that word in Arabic. The effects of sins, right? Yeah, okay, that's a thing, yeah. So like our sins, like sometimes, yeah, Allah does punish us in this world because He doesn't want to punish us in the akhirah. And there are effects of sins, like if somebody's repeatedly committing sins without any repentance, right? They're not doing tawbah in the middle. Like if you commit a sin, you do tawbah, it's gone, right? Inshallah. But if somebody repeatedly commits sins, they're going to find certain effects on their heart. Like they'll have less energy for ibadah. They'll have, some of their knowledge might get taken away. They start forgetting the stuff that they knew before, Islamically, like Islamic knowledge or whatever. They'll just, even loss of rizq. Ibn al-Qayyim mentions also that your rizq gets taken away, or the barakah gets removed from your rizq as well if you commit sins without repentance. So, yeah. Yeah. So last time I went overtime, so I had to cut it, and now it's like, I guess it was too short, but you know. I was like, because last time I went overtime, I didn't want to go overtime, so Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. All right. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. But yeah, if you guys have questions, you can still ask, but I think it was pretty straightforward.